Welcome back to Insights with PT. Picking up with where we left off, let's continue with this special edition of This Is My Story with Pastor Tola.
Yeah, thank you once again. Here we are. Um, but I think I talked about how I got married, to Pastor Kofo, and we had our first child. Um, After then, we started looking for a church. We were attending um, a local church, Household of God Fellowship, in Ikeja, which we attended for about 4 years. Um, so after 4 years, we started looking for another church. Um, and the reason was that I had this urge in me that I wanted to, I believe I could do more than I was doing. I wanted to give more. Looking back at my life, I've always seen the hand of God, my life. I've always seen the hand of God. And even though I didn't know that God, would have me do ministry, but I knew there was just something special about my life. And despite all the challenges that I've talked about, I still knew that there was something special about my life, And a few people close to me also saw this, and they always talked about it. My mom never stopped talking about it. She's a past, and a few people here and there. So I also started paying attention. And so when I felt this urge of I could give more than I was giving. But the church we were in then, I felt I couldn't really serve the way I wanted to. So we started looking. So it took a minute. Eventually, we walked into this church. It was on the 31st of December. And I felt the atmosphere was very nice. The pastor preached a wonderful message, and it was a watch night service. But it wasn't watch night as we know it now. That is, it goes into 12 midnight. No. It started about 7 o'clock, and then about 10 o'clock we were dismissed. Do you understand? I didn't understand that then, but now I understand it was because it was a branch of the Redeemed Christian Church of God, and the whole group, Redeemers itself, they do the watch night service that goes into the middle of the night and all. So a parish or a church of the whole group could not be doing their own at the same time when they. So now I know, when I got into the system. But then I didn't understand it. But it really didn't matter because we left the place, I was fulfilled. I just went home and I said to my wife, we both went, and I said to her, I think we found our church. This is the church we'll be attending. That was the Apapa parish then. So we joined the church and then ministry started. I started as an usher. I've always said that, if you want to work for God, one of the best places to start from is ushering, and also because, it's not a whole lot that is expected of you spiritually, in quotes now. I'm not saying you are not going to be spiritual, but what I'm saying is that, the instructions they give you in ushering people to their seats and making sure everything is comfortable or taking offering or doing this, they are not spiritual instructions. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I started as an usher, and after a year, almost 2 years, at that time, the denomination I was in, RCCG, was setting up churches, a lot of churches, duplicating itself, replicating itself all over. And then, so they started a new church. And my pastor then asked me to follow the new pastor to be his assistant. So I left the main church. So I went to another part of town to start this church with this man. And he was the pastor, and I was the assistant pastor. I think 2 weeks or 3 weeks later, I got a message from my pastor saying I should come back to the headquarters, in quote now, of the Power Parish, the main church. So I went back and I I said, so why did you ask me to come back? And the pastor said, oh, we have a problem, and we'll be looking for who can manage the problem for us, but we couldn't find any, but we thought you could handle the problem. So I said, what was the problem? He said it was parking, that they had parking challenges, and he felt I could help the church. So that's how I left being assistant pastor. I came back to parking cars, But all that really didn't matter, because for me, all I wanted to do was to serve God. It was in the course of the parking, then I was moved to some other departments. I was moved into maintenance. That maintenance took a whole lot out of me, because you had to get the church ready for Sunday services. This was the church when I joined. Maybe there were like 60-something people. At this point, the church had grown to about 3,000 people. So to get the church ready, to get the toilets and the bathrooms ready, to clean it, to supervise all the people, and because there was lack of power, electricity, you had to get the generators ready on standby. To buy diesel, if you live in Nigeria long enough, you know what I'm talking about, was a problem. That was my problem. I had to source for diesel. In short, there must not be a break in the service. Once the service starts, there must not be a break. So that's my job. And every Saturday I was in church from like 10 a.m. till 7 p.m. every Saturday for many years. That was just... So I stopped going for weddings. I stopped going for a lot of parties. It's either I say my wife should go, or she'll say, oh, she can't go alone because she's not single. That, and all that. I said, okay, that's all right, but I can't go because I have to be in church. Anyway, we did that, and everything went well. And after a while, I was ordained an assistant pastor. I had an experience. In the course of one of the years, they were looking for a pastor that could go and take over, for about 3 months to pastor the church in Germany. We had a church in Germany then, and they couldn't find anybody. I was parking cars then, I think, or maybe I can't remember where, So eventually they realized I was the only one that had a visa. So they came to me and said, hey, Tola, can you take time off? Now at that point we had started the business. When I say we, my friend and myself, Pastor Bayo Adewale, we started finance business, and so I could manage my time. Excuse me. All my friends or contemporaries that were pulpit ministers, none of them had visa. So eventually I was sent, so I had to go to Germany, and I was there for 3 months. The pastor at that time in Germany is now the current Shonwa for Gumosho, Kabisi, Pastor Gandhi Olaoye, So I had to take over from him because he wanted a break, and so we did the church in Germany for about 3 months. After that, I came back to Nigeria, and then he continued before he went to America, and all. And that was my first stint of trying, as it were, to pastor a church. I'd never pastored a church until, we came to America. Now, in coming to America, God showed me a vision one day, and I saw myself and my wife and the children. We had 2 children then, and leaving Nigeria and coming to America. And God said, I will show you the time to leave, but when you are leaving, make sure, just do what I say. But God didn't show me what I was going to do. So when I woke up, I told my wife, this is it. And she was working in a bank. I had a business that we had, employees and all that stuff, So it was really a tough one. But I knew this was from God, So she had not heard from God. She was not really willing to take that risk. So I didn't fight it. So one day, we went to a friend's house, one of the 4 friends that I lived with in college. And that friend now said, "Oh, are you guys traveling abroad?" I said, "Why do you ask?" And he said to me, "Oh, God showed him a vision. I saw us in a new house, and that house was not in Nigeria. So are you guys traveling?" So I said to him, "You need to talk to my wife. That I already know what God said, but you need to talk to her." That was a breaking point for her. Because how could somebody else know we are traveling, if not God? You understand? So I left it at that. We continue our business because God had told me He's going to let me know when to move. So I was waiting to hear when I could move. Then I went to the American Embassy with some friends because those friends were directors of our company, and they wanted to travel for an exhibition. The exhibition had to do with a lot of agric, and milk, how to import milk. We wanted to bring in some milk into Nigeria to sell, and also our company was going to look at the whole expo and then see what we can do. So the guy, the agric attaché there then looked at me and said, "So how many people are going?" Well, I said, "Only these 2 people." He said, "You are not going?" I said, "No." He said, "But why are you not going?" I said, "Because this is a corporate thing and the company has accepted 2 people should go." So he asked me, he said, "Oh, do you have a visa to America?" I said, "No." He said, "And you are not trying to get a visa from me?" I said, "I've never seen," that's what he said. He said, "I've never seen a Nigerian behave like this, He said, "I'm going to give you a visa, even if you're not going." I said, "No, don't worry. When it's time for me to go to America, I'll go. Don't worry." He said, "I'm going to give you a visa." He said, "Go and bring a passport." So the 2 of my friends, they got their visas. They eventually traveled. So I came the following week, and I brought my passport, my wife's, and the 2 boys. So when I brought it to the secretary of the guy, the secretary said, "Oh, but he asked you to bring only your passport." I said, "You think I'm going to take a visa and I won't get a visa for my wife? Do you think I will travel to America alone?" So as God would have it, the guy walked out of his office and he saw me again. He said, "Are you this guy again? What's the problem?" Asking the secretary. The secretary now explained. And the guy said, "Give them the visa, man. Apply for the visa for them and get them the visa." That's how I got American visa. So eventually, I now went to do on a business trip. I was sitting in the living room of a friend of mine in London, and I was watching TV. It was about 7 p.m. I can never forget. This was 1995 or something. And then I saw that they had killed Ken Saro-Wiwa, one of these, South leaders who was fighting for their rights. The government had taken over their land, messed up the whole land. And so they killed him. The military people, eventually killed the guy. So when I saw the news, I said, "Wow, they killed this guy." Immediately, God just spoke to me and said, "This is what I was waiting for. That 6 months from today, you must leave Nigeria. 6 months, maximum."
Wow.
So when I heard that, I said, "Okay." So went back home, told my wife, I said, "Now we have to leave." God said 6 months. What are we coming to do? I said, "I don't know." God just said, leave.
Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. A huge thank you to Pastor Tola for sharing such powerful and personal stories with us. Stay tuned every Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time as we dive into further chapters of his story. Thank you.